And his idea, his notion of the utopian society that his radical movement wants to create, or is to resurrect the caliphate of the 7th century when, as he imagined, these laws, these precise regulations regarding every aspect of life were in effect. But at the same time, it's important to remember that in this movement, this idea of resurrecting the 7th century was also and is also is pictured also as a leap into the future, as a modern movement. That sometimes people mistakenly imagine that the Islamist radicals merely want to return to the 7th century and that it's a kind of a medieval movement. But it's not really a medieval movement. It's a movement that wants to be in the 7th century and also in the modern age at the same time. And you can see an example of that in that first hair-raising video of bin Laden after the September 11 attacks, where he sat with Zawahiri and other people on a rock in Afghanistan, and dressed in robes and looking like they were out of the Middle Ages, and yet with the tape recorders and microphones right there as part of the setup, without any effort to disguise it. And the whole thing presented as a video, not as an ancient text written on parchment, but as a video. So it was an evocation of something highly modern, completely up to date, which at the same time was ancient and of the 7th century.
Let me ask you though, back to, again, I hate to keep trying to get to how do you negotiate out of this, and maybe you can't negotiate out, but what are these suicide bombers doing? What motivates somebody to get on one of these airplanes and die for this cause? What are they after?
Well,
and what's modern about this? How are they moving into the future?
Yeah, well, I mean, what's motivating them is their revolutionary ideal of creating this new society, which is going to be the 7th century caliphate in a modern version.
Do they want us gone?
They want us gone, or either gone or converted to their vision, and that's the motivation. It's a revolutionary motivation. That's at one level, but at another level, at a deeper level, their motivation is to die and to kill as many people as possible. And this ought to be recognizable to us, because what was Hitler's motivation, or what was Stalin's motivation in starving to death the peasants of the Ukraine in the 1930s? That the motivation behind these different campaigns, which ought to be familiar to us by now, is on one hand to do good, and however good is described, and on the other hand to pursue a cult of death. And that's what these suicide bombers are about, or suicide terrorists are about.
What is your suspicion as to why there is so much hatred over these years about Jewish people, when there are only, 14, 15 million Jews in the world? You got over 200 million Arabs in the world. There's 6 million of those 14, 15 million in this country. So what is it where does that hatred come from? What's your sense?
I mean, this is one of the great mysteries, but each one of the totalitarian movements has obsessed about the Jews. The Bolsheviks didn't begin that way, but Stalin, by the end of his life, was obsessing about the Jews and was planning a gigantic massacre. Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, they were all obsessed about the Jews. Likewise, the Baathists and the radical Islamists. And I think a basic reason, I think that there are two reasons, and the basic reason is that although some of these movements are secular or even atheist, I think at a deep level, all of these movements come out of a religious vision, and this religious vision has its deepest origin in Christianity, and in the Christian Gospels themselves, you see the hatred of Judaism, and it's an early competition between Christianity and Judaism, which took the form of a hatred of Judaism, and the particular form in which this emerges into modern totalitarianism is through what you can see in the book of the Revelation of St. John the Divine, the weirdest and strangest, most apocalyptic of sacred texts. And there you have a picture of a people of God struggling against the synagogue of Satan, of inner pollutants in Babylon and external foes, and all of this is just inextricably linked with a hatred of the Jews.
But if you went into a mosque over in the Middle East and you tapped some guy on the shoulder and said, "Why do you hate the Jews?" What would he tell you? I mean, would it be all because the imam up there had told him to hate the Jews? Is it, or did they intellectually think about this?
There's a lot of intellectual thought about this. I mean, in the case of the Muslim movements, obviously there's a real irritant in the existence of Israel and some of the Israeli policies, so that there are real grievances which can't be ignored or dismissed. But the real grievance, and with the Israelis sometimes at fault and sometimes not at fault, but the real grievances are not the grievances are not really the source of this movement, and the Islamist movement, with its hatred of the Jews, began before there was an Israel. So it predates Israel, predates the very existence of Israel, and it certainly and Qutb himself was hanged in 1966. So before the 1967 war, before the Israelis controlled the West Bank or Gaza or anything like that. So the hatred for the Jews in their movement, as in all the movements, comes from, on one hand, this religious background, and here the Quran is almost weirdly parallel to the Gospels, in that the Quran describes a early struggle between Muhammad and the Jews of Medina, in which as Muhammad is trying to found Islam and the Islamic State, and the Jews of Medina are described in the most diabolical fashion. So on one hand, the hatred of the Jews comes out of that, out of an ancient religious hatreds. On the other hand, in each of these cases, hatred of the Jews comes from a notion of the Jews as a modernizing force, as a modernizing group who haven't assimilated into the larger traditional religious culture, and who have lived somewhat apart or maintain their own separate cultural identity, and therefore inherently can't avoid introducing into society a notion that there's going to be more than one point of view, that there are going to be arguments about some things, and then finally the Jews in modern times have played a modernizing role, have been pioneers in different kinds of thought, and so this also has aroused a great hatred.
So where do you come down on George Bush's Middle Eastern military move?
George Bush's...
I mean, as a liberal...
Yeah.
I can see you smiling, but as a liberal,
yeah,
where were you when the United States attacked Iraq?
Well, I don't think the United States attacked Iraq. The United States attacked Saddam.
Yeah, whatever.
And I like to think that the United States liberated Iraq. I supported that. I think that Bush did the right thing in invading Afghanistan and overthrowing the Taliban, and I think he did the right thing in invading Iraq and overthrowing Saddam. I think that...
Is that hard to say? From here, I mean, was it hard for us? And I assume you know other liberals that feel the same way you do.
Well, I know a few, but it's not the conventional position among liberals or on the left.
But a lot of writers were on your side. A lot of liberal writers in the
some, yeah.
John Friedman, Dave Ignatius.
Yeah, some, and
Cohen.
I've thought from a military point of view all that was correct. However, in all other ways, apart from the military, I think that Bush has done a very bad job of it, and this is a really serious problem. That in Afghanistan it was militarily well done, and the tremendous fears that many people had of masses and masses of Afghans being killed in a brutal American military operation. This didn't happen. I mean, many people were killed, but not anywhere as many as was feared. Militarily, it was done well, but the job of reconstructing Afghan society along the lines of something that can eventually evolve into a proper liberal democracy, this has been done quite badly. Not nearly enough money, effort, manpower has been put into that. So that's quite bad. In Iraq so far, there's a lot to worry about. I think that Bush bungled the explanation of the war badly. He was unable to recruit allies. I think diplomatically, he's the worst president we've ever seen. Even if militarily he's quite good.
But go back to the two people you cited in your book, Camus and Qutb. Who was Camus? When did he live?
Camus was born in, I forget, 1912 or 13, somewhere around there.
When did he die?
And he died in the I'm not sure, in the 50s, mid-century.
But he was from Algeria originally. He lived in France.
Yes.
What would he say today about all this? Is there a solution to this problem?
Well, I think what I don't know what he would say.
I mean, based on your analysis of him,
I think that what he offers is a notion of terrorism and totalitarianism as being pretty much the same thing. There's the same cult of death that I've been talking about in the name of a utopian ideal, and I think that he understands that from reading Camus you can get a pretty good idea that these are serious intellectual movements with serious ideas, even if they're a little deranged or a lot deranged, and the proper way to deal with them, or a crucial way to deal with them, then is at the plane of ideas. And this is one of the things we've done so badly, that the only way to defeat these movements, as I say finally, is intellectually. People have to be persuaded to abandon these ideas in favor of other ideas. And sometimes it's the case that military action is needed. And I think that military action in the case of Afghanistan and Iraq was a good idea. But military action is not an end in itself, and can't even accomplish very much if the people, if masses of people, of millions and millions of people, end up still clinging to the same ideas that they clung to originally.
We're about out of time. I just want to a couple quick things. By the way, do you have a family? Children, or
my personal life is a matter for a whole other show. I don't have children, no.
This book, Terror and Liberalism, it's got a white cover, nothing on it. Your picture's not in it. Any reason for the simplicity?
Well, the simplicity was the inspiration of the editor, Elaine Mason, at Norton, the publishing house, and I think it expressed really. I mean, it's a serious book. I hope it's not an hysterical book. It's not. A lot of books scream at you from the bookstore. I think my book, the idea is not to scream at you, but just to present it starkly and simply.
And you said the New York Times Magazine ran the Qutb piece in the first place. What time period did they run that?
That ran in March.
And this book was finished when?
The book was finished in December. I wrote the book basically in 5 months in the summer and fall of 2002.
We're out of time. Here's what the cover looks like. Our guest has been Paul Berman, and the name of the book, Terror and Liberalism. Thank you very much.